Hi guys, welcome back. So we've now got our IK handle at the wrist of this skeleton, this joint chain. So let's have a look at it. So make sure your outline is open so you can select these things. So select the IK handle and just bend the wrist up and down. Have a play with the handle. So zero it out. We can just do that by selecting the root and going assume preferred angle. And we're just going to create a couple of controls before we start binding some mesh. So we use the V hotkey to snap this control to the center of the joint, and we created the IK handle and noticed that the control was just a little bit off, so I just held V again and just snapped it. I'm just going to go to this shoulder control and do the same thing. Holding V, which is snap to point, and good, it's in place. So the first thing we're going to do is make this control the controller for the IK handle. It's a lot easier to grab a circle than it is an IK handle that's also attached to a joint. So with a parent, it would be select the child first and then the parent second. With a constraint, it's the other way around. So we want to select the controller first. So you select the controller first and shift select the IK handle and apply the constraint. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use an outliner to do my selections. And right now my shoulder control is in between my IK handle and my wrist control. So I'm just going to middle mouse drag it out of the way so that I can select these two items in the outliner. So we're starting off with the control and we want to shift select the IK handle. Then go constrain and use point constraint. Bring up the settings box, reset the settings, and tick maintain offset, add. So I'm just going to check my control handle now. So there's my handle, and it is clearly controlling my IK handle, which is in turn controlling my arm. I'm just going to zero out the IK handle. So for your information, an IK handle should never be rotated. It should only ever be translated in 3D space. A joint, a bound joint that's actually active, should never be translated. It should only be rotated. So this shoulder control is actually a rotate control because it's controlling the root of an IK relationship, which means it's basically just controlling the joint. So what I'm going to do here is select my IK controller, shift select my shoulder controller and hit P. So this wrist controller is designed for translation and this shoulder controller is designed for rotation. And you might want to use a different controller shape just to mark out what's for rotation and what's for translation. Before we go forward and bind this skeleton to our actual mesh, to our actual character mesh, I'm just going to tidy this scene up just a little bit. So the first thing we want to look at is this here is the IK controller. Now what do we want to do with this IK controller? We only want to translate it. We don't want to rotate it. We don't want to scale it. So what we're going to do, select it in the channel box, select the rotate channel, shift select all the way through scale, hold right mouse and go lock and hide selected. So now when you're animating, you can't accidentally rotate this because the channels are hidden and unrotatable. I'm just going to move up to the shoulder control. Now this controller in particular is a rotate controller because it's a forward kinematic controller. We don't want to translate this controller, just rotate it. So we're going to hide the translate channels, right mouse, lock and hide. And we're going to hide the scale channels, right mouse, lock and hide. The next thing I want to do is add a little bit of limitation into this, and I'm going to do that in the attribute editor. So I'm going to make an assumption here that that's as far as I ever want to rotate this arm, period. So what I'm going to do is open the attribute editor, go to the shoulder control, and right now we're rotating in the negative Y. So I'm going to make a decision that that's as far as I want to rotate in negative Y. So I'm going to go down to my shoulder control attributes into rotate. into Y, negative, and I'm going to add that value using this arrow key to my limit and activate the limit. So now when I rotate to there, it stops. It cannot go any further. I'm going to do the other way. So this is in the positive Y. Let's just stop there, and I'm going to use the positive arrow and add the limitation. So now I can only rotate that far. And you need to make those decisions based on how far your character can stretch without breaking your mesh. So go through and add some limitations to the rotate shoulder controller, and also add some limitations to the wrist IK controller. So in this case, I'm using translate, and I bend it to there, go down. I'm getting inside the area of the body, so I might not want to go beyond that. I'm just going to check which way I'm going. So that's negative value 29.69 in translate X. So I'm going to copy the value and activate the limit. So now the arm always stops there. What's more important is going to be your positive value. See, once you get past the limit of the arm, your controller starts to go beyond the actual IK handle. So let's zero this translate values on this out. So I'm just going to go to the channel box and zero it out. And that is as far as I want to move in that axis. So let's just see where that's going. So that's 0. So in my maximum value, I'm going to copy 0 and activate it. And now we can't accidentally pull the arm further than it's meant to go. Okay, it's time to actually make this skeleton do something. So I've just checked my controllers zeroed out, and I'm just going to go show all and display show all in my menu. So now I've got my mesh and I've got my skeleton. So what you want to do is select the root of your skeleton, shift select your mesh, and go skin, bind skin, smooth bind, and go into your settings box. Reset the settings, and the skinning method we're going to use for this is going to need the least amount of editing, is going to be weight blended, and then go bind skin. So now I've got my skin and I have my controller, and I can animate my hand. So you can then go through and set your keyframes on your controllers. If a character is rigged correctly, you don't actually have to touch the joints at all. You use the controllers to animate your character. So guys, just make sure before you bind your skin, you've double checked that your joints are in a good position. So now that I've checked that, I've got an animatable hand, and my fingers are rotatable joints, which will deform the mesh. So I can set my keyframes on my joints, and I can set my keyframes also on my controller. So before we wrap this rigging shoot up, I just want to show you one more thing. You may be wondering what these joints are actually doing to the mesh, and if there's errors in them, how can you fix them? So when we chose the bind smooth skin, we basically told each joint to have a certain influence on the vertices that surround it. Now you can actually visually paint that influence, and I'll show you how that's done. So if you select the mesh and you go skin, edit smooth skin, paint skin weights tool, in your actual tool settings, you'll be able to select each joint one at a time. As you select them, you'll notice areas in the viewport will go white on the actual mesh. White means that the selected joint has a degree of influence over the mesh. Where the mesh is black, that joint has no influence whatsoever over the mesh. So I'm just going to select this ring joint 1, and that's the influence that that ring joint has over the mesh. Where it's kind of grey, it's a arbitrary value. So I'm just going to add some influence from that joint into a different part of the mesh. I'll show you what happens. So now that joint also affects the thumb. So I'm just going to hit Q to drop out of the tool. That's the joint that we're editing. And now it's actually affecting the thumb. So this is a example of how the paint weights tool affects the mesh and affects the joint's influence on the mesh. If you find that you're having errors in your deformation, you can come back and then use black and white paint to fix up the errors and have the mesh deforming more naturally and more smoothly.